Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll make a quick run through all the top business stories across the African continent. From Nairobi, Cairo, Johannesburg and Lagos, we've got you covered. Here's what's coming up. The South African gold producer Sibanye Gold seeks to cut jobs in order to boost productivity. Kenya and Nigeria make efforts to forge trade ties and make more intra-African trade a reality. And in Cape Town, we'll introduce you to an entrepreneur who's redefining traditional attire. Let's start tonight, however, in West Africa, where Liberia has entered a recession, and the government there needs to curb spending as the Ebola outbreak continues to spread in West Africa. Finance Minister Marakone says movement restrictions have hampered agricultural and business activity. The International Monetary Fund cut its growth forecast for Liberia's economy to 2.5% this year from a prior figure of 5.9% as the outbreak escalated. The World Health Organization says Liberia has been the worst hit by the virus. Over 50% of the total deaths in West Africa have taken place there. President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has requested emergency spending power with a plan to spend $20 million in order to contain the epidemic.
Based on the latest information available, growth could decline by at least 3 to 3.5% in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and by about 1.5% in Guinea. All three countries do have a IMF program, so we're in active engagement right now with the authorities to help determine how we can cover the additional financing requirement that they're facing.
On to South Africa now, where Sibanye Gold is in talks with unions and other stakeholders about potential job cuts at its Cook 4 mine. Now, the firm plans to cut up to 2,500 jobs there. It's an operation near Johannesburg, which it recently acquired. In total, the firm has a workforce of about 39,000 individuals with another 5,000 contractors. Company spokesman James Wellstead said it was premature to talk about precisely how many jobs may be on the line. He did say, however, that Cook 4 had been affected by government-ordered safety stoppages and its productivity had taken a hit. Job cuts are a fairly thorny issue in South Africa. Labour relations, especially in the mining sector, are extremely tense, and the general unemployment rate is about 25%. Angelo Coppola, of course, has been keeping tabs on this story. He's live in Johannesburg with us right now. Angelo, for those of us who are not familiar with intricacies of South African labour law, what exactly does a Section 189 consultation process involve?
Well, basically, Raman, it involves the management or the employer informing the union that they plan to restructure and or retrench. And the mine has to inform the union or the unions that are on that mine first. And the Act almost insists that the employer and the union engage in what they call meaningful joint consensus-seeking processing. So in essence, what it means is the union has to work with management to decide who gets the axe and when and what the final package is going to be. Raman?
Indeed. Speaking of unions, the National Union of Mine Workers is opposed to cost cuts. Union leaders say members are willing to go on strike if necessary. Do they have an alternative set of solutions that they're proposing aside from job cuts?
Well, Frans Baleni, the NUM leader, doesn't propose any alternatives. In fact, it appears as if they're going to take the legal route almost immediately, which means probably the Labour Court first, where they're going to try and get some kind of direction whether they can or can't, first of all, restructure or retrench, or whether they can or can't go and get a strike notice, which means that they'll then go on strike. The NUM view basically is that if the mine proclaims itself to be the most profitable in the sector, why on earth would they want to retrench? For the mine, it just doesn't make sense. Raman?
Indeed. Let's pull back a bit here, Angelo, and look at the sector as a whole. Between declines in gold prices and the rising cost of inputs, especially electricity, just how many South African gold miners are profitable?
Well, very interesting question. I went and had a dig around, and I was speaking to the Chamber of Mines late this afternoon, and they suggest there are around 23 operational gold mines in South Africa at the moment. And according to the Chamber of Mines, Roger Baxter, He says that less than 50% of those mines are profitable. They're profitable at current commodity prices, but that could all change if and when wage negotiations start. Because bear in mind that AMCU now holds 21% membership in the gold sector. So we can look forward to some disruption of some form. If it's not from NUM, it'll definitely be from AMCU. Rama?
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you for that. That's Angelo Coppola live in Johannesburg, South Africa. He'll keep tabs on that particular story for you and keep you updated later on. Now, let's move on to an economic conference which has been held in Egypt. The business community and the government essentially went head-to-head, trying to find ways to improve the business environment after a fairly turbulent set of years in the country. Yasser Kim has the details on what transpired.
Dwindling foreign currency reserves, high budget deficit, growth rate in the negative and lack of revenues. This is the state of an economy surviving 2 uprisings, 8 governments and 5 presidents in just 3 years. To revive the economy, one major sector that needs attention is the private industry and foreign investments, which dropped by 80% after 2011.
Our main crisis is in bureaucracy. It's killing the industry. It takes at least 2 years to get a license to start production here. Bureaucracy also opened the door for another catastrophe here, which is corruption.
It's not an easy task. Businessmen have highlighted deep issues that prevent foreign investments.
Our main crisis is in bureaucracy. It's killing the industry. It takes at least 2 years to get a license to start production here. Bureaucracy also opened the door for another catastrophe here, which is corruption.
Khamis also complained about the price of land. Land for his industries in the United States, China and Turkey cost from $3 to $10 per meter. In Egypt, a staggering $150.
How can we be competitive this way? We need an overhaul in investment laws and regulations first.
Our problem is that we lack vision. There must be clear strategies that would make any investor feel safe when working in Egypt. It's doable, but we need open-minded, courageous officials to change the culture of routine and corruption in this country.
That's not all. Governments after the 2011 uprising cancelled all contracts with companies that were claimed to be corrupted. They slammed a huge bill on the private companies to revise these contracts. This prompted many investors to escape. The government has eased their fears.
We understand that it's not the business's fault that there was corruption in the governments before. We therefore ratified a new law that prohibits amending or reneging on any contract signed with the government. They are binding on all. No government or court can touch it anymore.
One final setback is the energy crisis. It has hit all industries and reduced overall production by 20%. Officials say they will add new power generators to the grid soon and are preparing renewable energy projects in partnership with the private sector in the next year. A host of problems that face businesses for years in Egypt have been discussed. Businessmen warn that if the government does not address them immediately, then foreign investors will not return and the economy will continue to suffer. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Quick run through the equity markets here for you. 2 highlights I'd like to point out. Sibanye Gold, of course, at some point was down about 4 percentage points or so, especially after news came out that NUM said they were not happy with this whole idea of cost cutting at the Cook 4 mine shaft, and they were essentially saying there is absolutely no way they're going to agree with that, but it did recover to close relatively flat at the end of the day. Over in Nairobi, the bourse listed its shares. They started trading earlier this week. They were listed about 9 shillings 50 cents, but they closed today at 21.50. It's quite the meaning of appreciation right there. Kenya, Nigeria, they're leading the way in making intra-African trade a reality. We'll have the details. And we'll also be in Libya, where business and internet users cry foul over poor connectivity. The details are coming up next. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
We do know that the strike isn't anywhere near close to coming to an end either. That means that those workers are going to sink even further into poverty.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Business Africa. Kenya and Nigeria have launched a trade and investment council designed to forge trade ties between the two of them. The states' respective chambers of commerce will lead facilitation efforts and broker government relations. The idea here is to open up investment opportunities in either country for the private sector. Trade between the West African and the East African economic powerhouses has been minimal, to say the least, and it's mostly intermediated by European firms. This story is our focus in What's Hot tonight.
The culmination of 8 months shuttle diplomacy between Kenya and Nigeria, and the beginning of a long trade relationship that should eliminate European middlemen and accelerate economic growth between the two countries.
I know Nigerians take Kenyan tea, but they never know because they get their tea from Europe. Our tea goes to Europe, and from Europe comes to Nigeria. Nigeria can consume the total production of Kenyan tea, and it doesn't have to go to Europe.
On the table are plans by the Dangote Group to open a milk processing plant in Kenya, as well as a market for Kenyan milk products in Nigeria, cassava and cocoa processing plants in Kenya, and as both countries implement strategies of moving the agriculture from exporting raw materials to beneficial processed products.
And we should change our own parlance and things we say. Is really home-to-home investment, because we are all at home right here in Africa. I must feel at home anywhere in Africa.
Expanding trade is key to accelerating economic growth between our two countries. Current changes in market requirements in some of our traditional markets will affect our export earnings and employment. Increasing trade between our two countries, therefore, will be of great importance to the citizens of our nations.
Africa spends in excess of $35 billion annually importing products that would easily be produced and processed within the continent, denying its economy associated jobs, income, and growth. Such partnerships are seeking to reverse that.
Look at Africa entirely. You look at West, you look at the East. With what treaties you are putting together within East and some part of North Africa, and also now you said about working with the Southern Africa. If that is concluded and West Africa has got its own ECOWAS treaty on trade, then virtually 90% of Africa is covered.
If you really don't want competition, do that which has not been done. And one of them is building a railway line between Lagos and London.
Members of respective chambers of commerce have 5-year visas to either country and have a target of increasing trade between the two countries by 50% within the next 12 months. Noel Makugu, CCTV.
Now, Libya is one of Africa's top oil producers, but despite the attendant oil revenues, its internet infrastructure is notoriously underdeveloped. Now, with civil war and ever deeper political divides in the country, any efforts to improve connectivity there have fallen right off the agenda. That said, a Chinese-Libyan agreement to bring high-speed internet links to the country might be able to improve connectivity levels and speeds. Yasmin Ryan filed this report from the eastern city of Tobruk.
Checking your Facebook account in Libya isn't always an easy thing to do. Libya might be one of the wealthiest countries on the African continent, but it also has some of the worst internet services. Internet outages are a daily occurrence, and for this internet cafe, that makes business tough.
The cuts hamper my ability to work. I don't have any other job. Sometimes the outages last for 24 hours, sometimes 2 or 3 days, sometimes a week. And ADSL is the only service available in Tobruk.
Libyan internet users have to deal with a lot of frustrations. Almost every evening, the internet cuts out, especially at peak times. There is some hope on the horizon. Libyan engineers have been working with 2 Chinese companies, ZTE in the east and Huawei in the west, bringing in technology and equipment. 3 years ago, an agreement was signed between the Chinese and Libyan governments to bring high-speed internet to Libya.
The Libyan internet users have to deal with a lot of frustrations. Almost every evening, the internet cuts off, especially at peak hours.
Once the project is implemented, internet speed will be a much faster 2 megabytes per second. This engineer at the National Telecommunications Company is one of those who's traveled to China for training. He's been there 3 times.
The capacity was limited, but the project, which was signed in 2011 between the Chinese and Libyan governments, will enhance the service and make it more complete.
In all the political chaos and the fighting, the Libyan-Chinese project to expand internet services has stalled. For internet users in Libya, a technology revolution can't come fast enough. Yasmin Ryan, CCTV, Tobruk, Libya.
All right, then let's make a quick run through commodity prices. Earlier on, we did touch, of course, on what's going on with Sibanye Gold. Gold prices essentially slamming into a 7.5-month low earlier today. The idea here is, of course, driven by a bit of speculation that the Fed might actually start raising rates and might have a rollover effect on gold prices later on. However, one other thing to keep in mind, we covered this in the last hour, cocoa prices. Cocoa Board in Ghana did get a $1.7 billion syndicated loan. They are expected to raise producer prices later on when the growing season does start next month in October. When we return, we'll be taking you to Cape Town, introducing you to an entrepreneur who's redefining traditional attire in the world of fashion. All that and more is coming up. Welcome back. You're watching Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Now then, let's take you over to Kenya, where a new project in the western end of the country is helping farmers to earn carbon credits using a new sustainable farming accounting system. The Biocarbon Fund initiative includes a range of low-carbon farming techniques that increase organic content in the soil and at the same time reduce the amount of carbon that gets up into the atmosphere. Jane Keo has more.
These farmers in Western Kenya are finding it difficult to adjust to climate change. Extended droughts and unpredictable rainy seasons are some of the problems affecting farming in the region. But a new program that offers training and money in exchange for carbon credits is hoping to change the situation. The initiative is known as Biocarbon Fund and is financed by the World Bank. The project is the first to help Western Kenya farmers earn carbon credits using a new sustainable farming accounting system. According to the bank, the Kenya Agricultural Carbon Project issued 24,788 credits under the verified carbon standard earlier this year. It's the first such issuance under the new carbon accounting system for low-carbon agriculture approved in 2011.
We have seen the climate change. The rains are now different than they were before. We cannot predict anymore when it is going to rain.
Forests in this area have been degraded. Trees have been cut down for fuel and the soil left open to erosion. The World Bank's Biocarbon Fund will buy some of the credits earned by the Kenyan project, investing around $600,000 by 2017. The project in Kenya includes a wide range of low-carbon farming techniques that increase organic matter in the soil and the amount of carbon held in the ground and out of the atmosphere.
What I liked about the training I received from the project is that it emphasized diversification. When one crop fails, I can still benefit from another enterprise.
The extra income generated from planting trees has also helped many families.
Since I joined the Biocarbon Fund project, our life has really changed, because when there's income in the family, there's peace.
So far, about 45,000 hectares of farmland have been engaged in the project. According to the Biocarbon Fund, tree planting in Kenya has already reduced 25,000 tons of carbon to the atmosphere. Jean Keo, CCTV.
Now, between globalization and faster transport and communication links, the way African communities live and work has changed quite a bit. One indicator of that? The way we dress. For many young people right across sub-Saharan Africa, traditional clothing and ethnic prints don't have quite the appeal they used to have. That's not the case, however, for a young South African entrepreneur who we're about to introduce you to. He's trying to change that trend with clothes that fuse elements of traditional design with modern fashion.
I am Latuma Ngokolo, born and raised in Port Elizabeth. When I was age 16, my late mother taught me how to hand machine knit. I was at grade 8 at that time. We went out looking for a TV set because we didn't have a TV set back home. And fortunately, my mother came across a knitting machine and we ended up going back home with that. So I became very enthusiastic. I wanted to know how to use the machine, how the machine works, and I ended up helping her to make knitwear. Since then, I've been making knitwear garments and actually developing other pieces. I wanted to create something which sort of solved a problem that I actually discovered amongst us as Xhosa people. There are about 8 million Xhosa people in South Africa. Traditionally, Xhosa boys between aged 18 to 25 go through a manhood circumcision, and before they go through that ritual, they have to give away all their old clothes, and that means buying a whole new wardrobe. And so I decided to develop a knitwear collection which carries those aesthetics, and made my own patterns which I made sure that they would be modern enough to actually be appealing to Xhosa initiates who are influenced by international trends. The Abatembu, they use a lot of blues in their beadwork. So I take some of those color combinations and actually play around with in my knitwear. And these are some of the motifs which I actually took from traditional Xhosa beadwork and actually modified them to be suitable for these type of modern garments. The material that I actually use for the knitwear is purely South African. The garments are made from 80% South African merino wool and 20% South African mohair, which are very fine fibers. I go for the finest fibers because I want a very soft handle. I supply about 3 boutiques locally, Cape Town, Joburg, and Port Elizabeth, my home. And now I'm actually exploring more overseas because knitwear consumption is bigger overseas. Some of the response that I get from people, they like my pieces because it is African and also quite modern at the same time. Amsterdam is my biggest potential market because I have a lot of interest that comes from there. So I'll be supplying a retailer that will be selling directly to the market in Amsterdam. I guess because they love their Scandinavian patterns, which is sort of similar or speaks the same language as that. I am looking at going overseas to study at the Central St. Martins to study textile futures. Textile futures is a course that explores and interrogates future innovations within textiles and material science as well. I want to make sure that by the time future innovations hit Africa or the globe, I am very well aware and prepared for that. South Africa is where I want to end up ultimately, but I obviously need all the knowledge and resources to be well settled and sit here knowing that I have a growing brand.
Let's make a quick run through the currencies here for you before we go. Two key things we're focusing on. The rand down to 7-month low against the American dollar. It did cross 11 rand to the dollar mark earlier sometime today. Paired back, moved back and got a big gains. But the MPC meeting will be coming up next week. Also keep in mind that Ghana does start talks with the International Monetary Fund later on next week as well. Both events certainly that will have a future influence on where the currencies go. But that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Do send your feedback on this to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. We're also online wherever you are. Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. That's it for this edition of the program. Thank you so much for your time this week. We'll do it again on Monday. Right now, though, Mahiamuto is up next. He's got your sports fix on Matchpoint.